me tell you what my expectation is that those who commit crimes in this country will be appropriately dealt with. Absolutely. And that we should not be allowing migrants who commit crimes into this country, and that, yes, migrant crime that kills people like Travis Wolf, whose death was shocking, whose death is inexplicable, indefensible. I actually do think, yes, I think it's an actual, wait a minute, it's my time, Mr. Isaacson. I actually think, and I want the record to be clear on this, that migrant crime is a real issue. Yeah, I wish the Remain in Mexico program had still been in effect when the killer of Travis Wolf crossed the border and was paroled illegally into the country. He might still be alive today. And if that's not an actual issue, I don't know what is. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Welcome back to Conservative Call, Patriots. Before we dive into today's absolutely infuriating footage, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe with notifications on, because big tech is trying to silence conservative voices like ours every single day. We need your support to keep bringing you the truth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for calling this hearing. Mr. Isaacson, if I could just start with you. In March of 2024, you wrote, "The murder of a nursing student in Georgia has a lot of people on the right talking about migrant crime like it's an actual issue." That'd be Laken Riley you were talking about?
Laken Riley was an unusual case.
Yeah, here, let's have a look. Here's Laken Riley.
Yes.
Her murder, her horrific murder at the hands of this illegal migrant who was also unlawfully paroled in the United States. Her death, not an actual issue?
It's a tragedy.
But not an actual issue?
Migrant crime is much less of an issue than U.S. citizen committed crime.
Not an actual issue? Those are your words. Her death, not an actual issue. I just want to get, no, you say.
Of course it's an issue. It's a tragedy.
So what do you mean by your post? It's not an actual issue, meaning we shouldn't be paying attention to it. Senate's wasting its time this week on the Laken Riley acts that would address the circumstances of her murder. What's your advice to us? We just discontinue those proceedings now?
I think the Laken Riley Act could do a lot of harm. It would allow me to say, oh, this person shoplifted, and that would be enough probable cause to get somebody deported.
Interesting. You're here, who invited you to this committee hearing today, Mr. Isaacson?
The minority party.
Yeah, it's interesting. You're here as a spokesman for the minority party. I just want to make sure the record's clear on this. The spokesman for the minority party is advising the Senate that the Laken Riley Act is a bad idea and we ought to stop it. The spokesman for the minority party is saying that Laken Riley's death and migrant crime is not an actual issue. I can't frankly believe that I am hearing these words. You said it's not an actual issue. I read you the quote.
Laken Riley's death was not an actual issue.
You said that the murder of a nursing student in Georgia has a lot of people on the right talking about migrant crime. You put it in quotation marks, square quotes, like it's an actual issue. She's dead because of migrant crime, right? Let's try something else. Here, do you know who this is? Do you know who this young man is?
I do not.
Travis Wolf, 12 years old, from my state. Murdered by an illegal migrant who was also, like Jose Ibarra, illegally paroled by the last administration.
Is your expectation that zero migrants?
Let me tell you what my expectation is that those who commit crimes in this country will be appropriately dealt with. Absolutely. And that we should not be allowing migrants who commit crimes into this country, and that, yes, migrant crime that kills people like Travis Wolf, whose death was shocking, whose death is inexplicable, indefensible. I actually do think, yes, I think it's an actual, wait a minute, it's my time, Mr. Isaacson. I actually think, and I want the record to be clear on this, that migrant crime is a real issue. I think the Laken Riley Act is absolutely necessary. In fact, I propose an amendment to the Laken Riley Act that will cover people like Travis Wolf. I think that ICE ought to be required to detain those illegal migrants who commit violent crimes against children, like Travis Wolf. And yes, I happen to think, as a former prosecutor, I happen to think that their violent murders are actual issues. And the fact that you would say otherwise, sit here and advise the Senate that the Laken Riley Act is a bad idea, that the whole thing is not an actual issue, it's all made up, I think is outrageous. I think it's absolutely outrageous. And the fact that you were invited here to give this testimony is stunning to me, I have to say. Absolutely stunning to me. Mr. Kucinich, let me just ask you, something else that Mr. Isaacson has said is that the Remain in Mexico policy was a program of death. A program of death. Is that your experience, having seen it implemented, a program of
As
death?
part of implementing it, my answer would be no. It was quite the opposite. And as I said in my statement, that the deterrent effect for illegal aliens to come that was gained by the migrant protection protocols, Remain in Mexico program, prevented a lot more abuse, child abuse, abuse of women on the journey, and death along the way than any of the crimes that occurred addressed to the people where the people in Remain in Mexico were the victims. So anytime we have illegal immigration going on, we have victimization of that population. It would be my view, and I think the dollars play it out, especially as you've seen since 2019, that the idea that the cartels benefited from the Remain in Mexico program is relatively ludicrous compared to the alternative. And the alternative we've lived with the last 4 years has been the greatest enriching of the most evil, vicious people in the Western Hemisphere in the history of this hemisphere.
Yeah, I wish the Remain in Mexico program had still been in effect when the killer of Travis Wolf crossed the border and was paroled illegally into the country. He might still be alive today. And if that's not an actual issue, I don't know what is. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Truth they don't want you to see. What you're about to witness is perhaps one of the most disgusting displays of liberal priorities I've ever seen in a Senate hearing. We have a Democrat witness, brought in by the minority party, literally telling senators that the brutal murder of Laken Riley and migrant crime in general is, quote, not an actual issue. Let me be crystal clear about what happened to Laken Riley. This beautiful 22-year-old nursing student was jogging on a University of Georgia campus when she was attacked, brutalized, and murdered by Jose Ibarra, an illegal immigrant who should never have been in this country. This monster was released into our communities by the Biden administration's catch and release policies. And now we have this witness, Mr. Isaacson, sitting before the United States Senate, saying her death is not an actual issue. The audacity is breathtaking. This is what the Democrat Party has become. Folks, they care more about protecting illegal immigrants than protecting American citizens. But it gets worse. The senator brings up another victim, 12-year-old Travis Wolf, also murdered by an illegal immigrant who was unlawfully paroled. A child patriots. A 12-year-old boy whose life was cut short because our government failed to do its most basic job, protecting its citizens. What really struck me was when the senator had to spell it out for this liberal witness. He said, and I quote, "I actually think that migrant crime is a real issue. I think the Laken Riley Act is absolutely necessary. The fact that this even needs to be said in 2024 shows how far we've fallen. The Laken Riley Act would require ICE to detain illegal immigrants who commit theft-related crimes. It's common sense legislation named after a young woman whose life was stolen by someone who shouldn't have been here. But Democrats and their witnesses are calling it harmful. Let me tell you what's harmful. What's harmful is releasing dangerous criminals into our communities. What's harmful is prioritizing the rights of illegal immigrants over the safety of American citizens. What's harmful is a government that refuses to enforce its own immigration laws. The senator mentioned he was a former prosecutor, and you can hear the righteous anger in his voice. This is a man who understands that when we fail to enforce consequences for criminal behavior, innocent people die. And the blood is on the hands of every politician who supports these reckless open border policies. Now let's talk about the Remain in Mexico policy that came up in this hearing. Mr. Cuccinelli, who actually implemented this policy, had to correct the record. The liberal witness called it a program of death. But Cuccinelli explained that it actually saved lives by deterring dangerous border crossings and reducing the power of cartels. This is the difference between someone who actually worked in immigration enforcement versus someone who just spouts liberal talking points. The Remain in Mexico policy worked. It kept our communities safer, and it reduced the humanitarian crisis at our border. But under Biden's policies, we've seen the greatest enrichment of cartels in the history of this hemisphere. These are the most evil, vicious criminal organizations imaginable, and our current administration has made them richer and more powerful than ever before. The senator made a powerful point at the end. He said if Remain in Mexico had still been in effect when Travis Wolf's killer crossed the border, that little boy might still be alive today. And if that's not an actual issue, what is? This hearing perfectly encapsulates what we're fighting against: patriots. We have one party that wants to protect American citizens and enforce our laws, and another party that's more concerned with political correctness than public safety. Every single American who dies at the hands of someone who shouldn't be in this country is a preventable tragedy. Every Laken Riley, every Travis Wolf, every victim of migrant crime represents a failure of our government to fulfill its most basic constitutional duty. The Laken Riley Act isn't just legislation. It's a memorial to a young woman whose dreams were cut short by our government's negligence. Supporting this bill should be the easiest vote any senator ever takes. The fact that Democrats oppose it tells you everything you need to know about their priorities. We cannot allow the deaths of innocent Americans to be dismissed as not actual issues. We cannot allow liberal politicians to gaslight us into believing that enforcing immigration law is somehow cruel or unnecessary. We cannot allow the safety of our families to be sacrificed on the altar of political correctness. This November, remember what you saw in this hearing. Remember that there's a party that thinks American lives matter, and there's a party that thinks protecting illegal immigrants is more important than protecting our citizens. Patriots, we're in a fight for the soul of our nation. Every like, every share, every subscription helps us get this message out. The mainstream media won't show you footage like this because it destroys their narrative. It's up to us to spread the truth. Make sure you're subscribed to Conservative Call and hit that notification bell. Share this video with everyone you know. And most importantly, make your voice heard at the ballot box. Our children's lives depend on it. YouTube description. In this explosive Senate hearing footage, a Democrat witness literally tells senators that migrant crime and the murder of Laken Riley is not an actual issue. Watch as a GOP senator completely destroys this liberal narrative with facts about victims like 22-year-old nursing student Laken Riley and 12-year-old Travis Wolf, both murdered by illegal immigrants who were unlawfully paroled into our communities. This shocking testimony exposes the Democrat Party's true priorities, protecting illegal immigrants over American citizens. The witness, brought in by the minority party, argues against the Laken Riley Act, legislation that would require ICE to detain criminal illegal immigrants. The hearing also features testimony about the Remain in Mexico policy, with former immigration official explaining how Biden's open border policies have enriched cartels more than ever before in Western Hemisphere history. Key moments include the GOP senator's passionate defense of American victims, his proposed amendment to protect children like Travis Wolf, and a complete dismantling of liberal talking points about immigration enforcement. This is exactly why we need strong border security, and why the Laken Riley Act must pass. Every American life lost to preventable migrant crime represents a government failure to protect its own citizens. The mainstream media won't show you this footage because it destroys their open borders narrative. Conservative Call brings you the truth they don't want you to see. Don't let big tech silence conservative voices. Subscribe to Conservative Call, hit the notification bell, and share this video to spread the truth about the border crisis and its deadly consequences for American families. Support the Laken Riley Act. Demand immigration enforcement. Remember these victims in November. Conservative Call, fighting for America's future one truth at a time.